Honestly, just because you take her home doesn't mean you can help yourself, or just because she doesn't say no doesn't mean she says yes. I mean, these things should be obvious, I guess, but not everybody really gets that right off the top. And when I first saw them, they almost came to me as a shock. It's the simple, thoughtful way of changing the scope of conversation. But somehow these dudes are taking it an attack, an acid in their face, and they're getting all uppity and saying rape isn't dudes' fault. Okay, I'll admit, there's a lot of complications in the system and everything's a little bit twisted, and it happens to dudes too, especially little boys, and that shit is unfucking acceptable. Pardon me to anyone on the PG rating side of things, but honestly, more often than not, it takes two people to tango. But when liquor and other complications enter into the scene and somebody isn't on top of their game and you choose to capitalize, you know you're not being a very nice guy. First off, dress is never an invitation to rape. I like to dress trashy. I'm gonna be honest. Given the chance, most days I go topless. I've been buying really scandalous underwear lately. Wearing it, I feel great. However, when occasionally some strange lady comes grinding up on my leg at a club, I put my hand on her face and separate her from me. Honestly, it doesn't happen very often. But what they've done is they've made a critical mistake, and they believe that I'm a piece of meat and that they can simply have their way. And people say, oh, woe be the attractive young man with girls all up in his grill. Fact of the matter stands still. How you choose to dress is never an invitation to change how somebody else behaves. These people, I think, they're just looking for a way to justify their already depraved behavior. Self-justification and self-deception are at the heart of the issue. They are the black spot at the core of the being. Now, MRAs. You're right. Men's rights activists. There's a lot of serious issues plaguing our generation today. Genital mutilation. That is crazy. The fact that they actually tie down babies and chop off the tip of their dick? MRAs. Let's come back. This is not about me or my struggles with alcoholism like every other 27-year-old who lives in the city and is forced to do the things we need to do to survive. It's about decency and giving people room to share their stories, and I'm full of pride to see things like... I think we might need to rewind. Can we kill this? Okay, honestly, there's so much that I want to say on MRAs, and there's a couple of guys, men's rights activists, and there's some people who used to be in my life who seemed like pretty bright guys, but have just gone crazy and bitter with this poison that's filling inside, and it may or may not have to do with their long-term success with the ladies. It may or may not have to do with trauma they faced as babies, and I mean, I know that it happens to men and it happens to women too, and believe me, I didn't come out as odd as I am without a little bit of abuse. But we need to let room for short stories to be shared, and if you honestly think that the deck isn't stacked in my favor, you are unaware. I am a attractive, intelligent, heterosexual white male. The sharing of stories is absolutely vital to our human survival, and you can't use the brick of logic to smash in the head of some chick who's trying to talk about her feelings. There's an emotional component to all of these stories that refuses to be put into tables. It refuses to simply enter equations, and now at 27, I'm finally facing the fact that logic is not the be-all and end-all in every conversation, and I'm sure reasonable men out there like myself have often found yourself driven up the wall thinking like, this problem is so easy to solve, why don't we just take feelings out of it for a second? But we can't take feelings out and still carry a conversation with respect. Slut walk. Women saying that they shouldn't be ashamed to dress the way they want. And still, these MRAs have got to come out and taunt and say that it's their fault what happens because of the way they choose to flaunt. And I mean, they actually have men who suggest that it's women's fault when rape takes place.
Like, if you're to say that a woman dressing provocatively is almost asking for it or doesn't have self-respect, that's like saying that a woman's body is inherently deserving of no self-respect and rape, which just isn't true. Like, it shouldn't. The amount of clothing that I'm wearing doesn't determine the type of person that I am, and having self-respect isn't about how much clothing you wear. I have plenty of self-respect, which is why I'm coming here to fight for this today.
Okay. MRAs, I get it. Domestic violence goes both ways. But it seems that most of the safe spaces are only for ladies. Does this mean that we should raise their buildings and burn them to the ground? Maybe that's going a little bit over the top. Okay, let's work together to set up safe spaces for dudes too. But really, when it comes down to a dispute, I've met a lot of ladies with a mean right hook. But I've never met a girl without a glass jaw. Safe spaces, you want them, create them. That's what people do when they want to see the world improved, is they build. They don't just claw and drag back and whine and scrape. You know, make the world a better place. Don't just hate people. Building a dialogue and understanding doesn't need to have a winner and loser. And frankly, logic, not always the be-all and end-all. And that's something that I've been hanging my hat on for a long while. And I've had to learn the hard way, as you undoubtedly will too. There's so much more to this experience of being human than you can quantify or qualify or put into a table. And this is sort of the edge of the gray line where even science can fail, because there's so much more richness and vastness and complexity that sometimes the best bet is to just sit quiet and listen. You guys want to have speakers and speeches, and this one time you tried to get together and the ladies were all beaches and they blocked the auditorium and they shouted over top of the talking. Man, that must be frustrating. Can you imagine if it happened for like 400 years? Can you imagine it stretching back to a time when women should only be seen, never be heard? Rhymes sometimes, it's kind of a stretch. But there's this assumption that all speech is free and all speech is equal. And if Ann Coulter showed up in my town, I'd roadblock her because that bitch is evil. And certain voices are given a lot more volume. Certain opinions share a much larger piece of the pie, as it were, and you won't see the same views coming through in the mainstream news as you might hear around a worker's table. Did this dude deserve to have his right to speak? Maybe. Should it be in a university? Not if I'm paying. Ditto with Coulter. Create your places, have your conversations, but don't be surprised when people show up with their waving fists and torch shaking. And you guys get the cheekiness too. You get in on the slut walk and act just rude.
I don't care what people say. I don't care what people say. It's the only way.
You love what? I love sluts. I want to see more sluts. I want to see them be sluttier. You know, I think sluts are great for morale. You know, and I'm just here to show my support for sluts.
Okay. How do you feel about consent
I think it's great.
Coward.
You think that's a good idea?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do.
Okay.
Consenting to, I consent to more sluts, that's for sure.
And how about consent to rape?
Well, I don't think that's possible. I think that rape is defined by a lack of consent.
Lack of consent.
Yes.
Okay. You're here for a men's rights group.
Yep.
And it says mensrightsedmonton.com. Is there anything you'd like to say about this website?
Yeah, we love sluts. We give total support to all the sluts out there, and we just want them to know that we love sluts.
Okay, that's the message. I'll make sure it gets up on this YouTube. CIactivist.org.
Right on. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, how you doing? Not bad. Yourself? I will send you the YouTube video when it's done. Right on. Thanks. We'll put one up on our site, too. I've seen them.
I can't even fathom the reaction. Like, how did it play out in your mind? Did you think that maybe these women would see your clever signs and suddenly be like, oh man, they've been right this whole time, and basically whenever I go have a couple of drinks and wear a top with a strap, I'm pretty much begging to be tied down and banged in the ass? That's really crude. And I think, MRAs, that it was really tasteless of you. I think that you're onto something, MRAs. There is real issues. I think that our generation of men is facing some serious things that we got to work through. Otherwise, we are screwed. Video games. How about that? There's now a whole generation who actually lack any sort of creative capacity, any sort of social skills. Wait, MRAs, before you go pulling up all those polls and studies that show the skills developed from playing games that include heightened reflexes, I mean, that stuff is great, but honestly, who are you kidding? I've been burning to get this one off my chest. I am 27 years old, and a lot of cats I know are kids because they're sitting around twiddling their thumbs and wiggling their wrists, and Call of Duty has undone 100 years of legitimate struggle and creativity and urges to persist. And I know less people who paint, I know less people who rhyme, I know less people who kickflip than at any other time in my life. I know dudes who talk about their kill counts like this is something that actually matters, and it's like part of the same system that tries to infatuate us with combat and war and sexy screenshots and other nonsensical celebrity splatter. We got to get off the games. We're crippled by these things, and we've basically forgotten what we need to do in favor of capture the flag missions. And I've been clean from video games for over 3 years, and I, not bragging, accomplish a lot more than a lot of my peers. There's some people who still outpace me by light years, but not a one of them is hooked on the COD. And we have these unreal images and expectations on TV. And again, MRAs, don't go crazy. Don't get defensive. Happens to ladies too. There's nothing wrong with admitting it, dude. We have different expectations that are forced on both of us. Forced on both of us by that same friggin' pelvic thrust. And they make us strive to be things that we're not, to make our bodies a certain way, and worse, they outline these subconscious expectations of how we should behave, and like the alpha male bravado, that part's got to change. The make big dollars and get wasted, that is super lame. It's a cultural shift that has to happen. But it's not going to get fixed by your anti-female slut walk protesting knee-jerk slapdash reaction. And I consider myself an activist. I consider myself passionate as shit. But I mean, I've been cornered too, and I've been called out as an enemy of various movements, and not just by you MRAs, because some of you men's rights activists think that my heart and my brain are in the wrong place, and that maybe I turned in my penis and membership card, or maybe I'm pandering to the opposition. But it's this very idea that there's an opposition, and I think that's where the problem stems from the beginning. But there's people in the activist community, not naming names, but who are quick to point fingers and are quick to throw shame at anyone whose ideologies don't go quite the same way, and some men who are near and dear to me who've tried to have conversations about how we as men need to come together and discuss our identity have been condemned and treated with indemnity, who've been nearly banished or excommunicated. But it's not the feminists who initiated this, it's these little slender hipster activists. My problems with the movement doesn't have to do with the human females. My problems with the movement doesn't have to do with human males. My problem with the movement has to do when human decency fails, when everybody resorts to name-calling and scratching nails. We got a lot of stuff on our plate. But isn't it possible that we work on improving our situation without trying to push everyone down at the same time? There's got to be a better way. Because when I see this supposed reflection of inequality and all this talk of injustice and how much better they have it than us, mostly coming from heterosexual white males, not saying that's all you MRAs, and I would personally like to high-five any MRA who is gay, because you have a lot on your plate. But you gotta admit that more often than not, the pendulum has swung our way. Don't get crazy. Don't get defensive. Don't start pulling up tables and your own evidence, and just look at the kind of broader perspective. I've had people say to me, why isn't there a straight pride day? Because, guys, every day is straight pride day. And it's not just dudes who are homophobic. Hey, ladies, really, every day is straight pride day. I've never worried that if I snatch a quick kiss, I might get dragged to the ground and stomped on and kicked. People don't drive by and shout, "Breeder!" if they see me walking down the streets holding hands with a girl. And as for white history, frankly, we pretty much wrote all of it. And I can't take the blame for what hundreds of years of douchebags did. But I got to admit that the perpetuators and the builders of this system of shit are mostly people who looked a lot like me. Maybe not quite the same height or striking cheeks, but really, we've helped make a hell of a mess, and we didn't do it directly. And I guess I understand where you're coming from when you might feel a little bit persecuted, when I might feel a little bit persecuted that I don't get nearly the same number of scholarships. I mean, there is something like 150 scholarships for white men, thousands for women. But should we empower ourselves by stripping away from them and bringing them back to the beginning? Why does their leg up need to be seen as holding us down? Why can't we build our own things? Why can't we all work together and work on the oars and slowly turn this boat around? But whenever somebody snaps at the advantage they perceive as being held by somebody who's been exploited when they were weak, it seems to me like it's just selfish, it's greedy, it's whiny, it's childish. Don't knock what they got. Work on something for us. I'd like to jump back, if I may, just a minute to self-deception, because that's something that's really hit me lately as kind of the biggest piece of the puzzle that was missing. And for a long time I was using crutches to get away with a bunch of things which were frankly disgusting. And it's always nice to have that easy out, to have that scapegoat to erase any last vestiges of doubt about the kind of person that I want to be or the kind of person I think I am. And be like, yeah, okay, so maybe I got a little bit ridiculous, and maybe I acted like a prick a bit, and maybe I pushed it when I know she didn't want it, but we were drinking, and that's how these things go. We can't give license to poisons to hold our wits and our faculties. And we can't constantly spin and twist our perception of reality to always put ourselves as an innocent victim, swirling in circumstance, carried away by the booze and caught up in the sweat and the dance and the pheromones and the hormones and the weed and the pills. And basically the long and short is that I'm discovering still that despite all of these years of work, I am but a fraction of a man. And I would really like to build something better if I can. And I think that to do it, I'm going to need a hell of a hand, but first off, I got to be honest with myself. Because I've been lying to myself, and these half-truths have been killing me. It's like this half-life of half-lies have become self-defeating prophecy. When I was honest with myself, when I am honest with myself, I'm honest with everyone else. But I'm so quick to change the script when there's even the slightest doubt. And maybe I should save this bit and go work on myself. But MRAs, if anything here you can take away to help, know that you're right in that we got some stuff we got to work on together. And I think that if we changed the conversations, it would be better. And I think it's important to remember that not every conversation is an argument. And that sometimes just listening when we don't get it is the hardest bit. And understanding and validifying someone else's experience is a great feeling. And it beats the pants off they don't understand and then sulking home and seething. And I'm sorry for what I said about your failed relationships. I'm sure you guys are great dads and you're really fun and shit. But I don't see it as productive, all the screaming and the frothing and all the name-calling and the taunting and all the petulant foot stomping. Let's start with something small, like the tip of a dick. Leave the feminists. Just work on the pricks. Not you guys the pricks. I mean legitimate dicks. End male circumcision. That's a starting stone step. That's it. We don't need to hate on their shelters or the twisted court system. We don't need to be baffled or angry that there's so many of us in prison. Let's just deal with the things one step at a time. And I'll worry about yours. You can worry about mine. CIactivist.org. My name is Ryjin Vander Hoek. Next up, Alumni Network. Coast to coast in Canada, progressive activists, we're making it happen. Nextup.ca, CIactivist.org, Edmonton, Alberta, Beaver Hills House Park, representing the wet sweatin'. Much love to all you humans.